disproportionate kind of areas of discipline that we see are in places like Avon or Farmington or places like that. And I know you guys are talking about Hartford, but I'm curious about what's happening out there, because that's where I see like the 90% girls who are being suspended or girls of color, or just really kind of surprising statistics. Can you guys talk about what's happening in those areas? Or?
Well, Mario had an interesting point when he talked about sort of the institutional racism that exists in Connecticut. So, on one hand, when you look at our juvenile justice system and you look at where are the kids coming from that make up the majority of kids that are in juvenile justice? Yes, the majority of kids by number are from Bridgeport, New Haven, Hartford, Waterbury, Stanford, and all of some of our larger cities. And does disproportionality exist in the numbers, whether it's school-based arrest, community arrest, number of kids on probation? You can go all the way through and you still see that level of disproportionality. The interesting thing in Connecticut is you have disproportionality even in your cities, which one of the reasons we shifted from disproportionate minority contact to racial and ethnic disparities is when you look at Hartford and Waterbury and Bridgeport, the quote-unquote minority makes up the majority of people in those cities. So we're looking really at the disparity lines. But it's interesting because in Hartford, if you look at school-based arrests per 1,000, the number is I think 3.3. You go to East Hartford, and I think a kid in East Hartford is 3.5 to 4 times as likely to be arrested in school as in Hartford. And you can go to every major city. Kids 3 times as likely to be arrested in Hamden as in New Haven, Stratford and Bridgeport. And so you see as you get into the suburbs, the overall number of black and brown kids in those areas may be smaller, but they end up being targeted more. So you're a parent, what does that mean? So you're a parent, you're in a city, you're short on resources and you want better for your kid. You go and you fight and work and you move out into a suburb where there's going to be more resources. But once you get there, your kid's being targeted much more. Your kids are more likely to be suspended and expelled and arrested. So it's almost like a pick your poison reality. It's like, okay, I can stay here and then have fewer resources, or I can go and better myself, and then my kids are going to really get this extra layer. And I can say from my own experience, the majority of cases I take are in Bridgeport, Norwalk, Stratford. The most just gut-turning bullying in cases that I take have been, in the suburbs, where just horrific things and targeting kids that are going on.
And that would be the same for the types of cases that we receive in terms of getting the cases, the most egregious cases that we receive are kids who are participating in like a choice program, and they're being bused out to suburban schools, and then the treatment that they're receiving once they get there is unconscionable, some of the things that are happening. And some of it's coming from the students, and it's a failure of the administration in terms of reacting and taking the immediate corrective action that I talked about to prevent a like occurrence. But it's also coming from the teachers sometimes and the administration. Where there was one case that I had where the teacher thought that it was a good idea to have the students read a book aloud, where there was only one black student in class that used the N-word over and over and over and over again. And so she just had the kids just, come to the front of the class, all the white students, and just keep saying N-word and N-word and N. And so then as the word is being said, all the kids are turning around and looking at the only black student in the classroom. And what happened is that at some point she got upset and she had a reaction that she shouldn't have, but under the circumstances that probably many adults would have had, which was to lash out, because it was like the N-word was written on the board, and now you have the kids saying it, and everyone's looking at me, and that is a lot of pressure. So I would say that that's been some of the most egregious cases are those types of circumstances.
So are those administrators and those teachers, are there programs like cultural competency, it's
Yes.
for everybody?
Yes. So in that type of case, what happens is the complaint of discrimination will be filed with us. The school gets sued. The deep pocket is the school, and that's who the parents want to sue. And then the school system ends up paying. So now you're taking money out of your school system to pay for an administrator who failed to act appropriately to prevent the discrimination from occurring, and in fact actually participated in it, especially once it became evident that maybe that's not the best lesson plan that you came up with, that you decided that let's read this aloud, you know, especially in a special education class where there are already some issues that the kids were dealing with. So it just really didn't make sense, and it exposed that school system to, you know, like tens of thousands of dollars worth of damages. Because the law is very clear. I like statutes, so I'm about to rattle off them, but Connecticut General Statutes 46A86 specifically say that you can get attorney's fees, cost, emotional distress damages, and other fees if you engage in discriminatory conduct. Like, that's the remedy. So when we prosecute these cases, that's what we're going after, are those types of remedies for the individuals who were subjected to illegal discrimination. And so these cases, you know, they're serious, and schools take them seriously. There's a lot of intervention that we get to do because there's some advocacy groups who say, we're going to have to call the Commission on Human Rights now. Okay, no, all right. What is it that we need to do? Because they know that the law allows for, you know, very significant damages.
But it takes advocacy groups, real quick.
They are so lying to me.
You know what it is? I live in a nice suburb. Left our apartment a couple years ago, and my wife is black, right? I got a little black girl, 8-month-old at home. I also have an 18-year-old stepdaughter who's half Puerto Rican, and she experienced some of that racism. And we went to the school. They were very responsive, but if we're educators. My wife is an administrator, right? I'm a director of the Board of Ed. They were very responsive because we knew the jargon. We went in, but later on we heard of other cases where there were inconsistencies with consequences for the same actions, and referring to Hartford kids as Hartford kids. All right, that's how Hartford kids look, right? So even those microaggressions play themselves out fairly often, but unless you know your rights and the law, that's why these organizations are so important. It just remains status quo.
This one's trying to say really quick.
Leon, I thought we were better than this. You got 1 minute.
I will summarize. So we started off with sort of an overview of the school and pipeline. That's when it sort of tied this discussion into the racial and ethnic disparities work. So you hear these scenarios, and the thing is, you identify every decision point where an adult is making a decision that impacts the child, and what decision are they choosing to make. So that child is being bullied, and that child reports it as a decision that you made. Are you going to follow 5222D and do what you're supposed to do, or are you going to brush it off and ignore it? If you ignore it and then that child then gets into a fight, that's a decision point. Are you going to suspend? Are you going to arrest? If you arrest both kids, are you going to have a case like mine where a black girl who's been bullied for 3 weeks and you're told that nothing happens, and then she hits the boy, initially goes judicial, and the white boy who starts the whole thing goes non-judicial, which is a lesson until I said no, that's not happening. So the key thing is to map all those decision points out. Look at the decisions that are being made, because when you do it in that fashion, you can say, okay, we have white, Hispanic, black kids who have these similar behaviors at these points. When you factor in same record, lack of record, or different decisions being made, that's how you really parse out and see where the disproportionality lies.
And when a complaint is filed with us, we look at 4 kinds of evidence really quickly. Direct evidence, statistical evidence, pattern.
I think that gold star for being quiet.
You have 2 lawyers on the panel.
I know, so we do have statistics on the suburbs that you were asking about. So in Avon, girls of color are suspended at 3.2 times the rate of their enrollment. In Coventry, 4.5 times. In East Windsor, almost 2 times. Same in Farmington and Glastonbury, it's 3 times. And we'll have this up on our community resource page for Community Matters, so you can check it out there. But I know you have one question, you may be able to ask it, but not get it answered, and then we will go to paintings.
So it's not a concise question, but
So you can write that down in an email.
So I think appreciating what the panel is offering and recognizing there are 2 lawyers and then also kind of the government commission. And so a lot of the conversation has been around kind of like the legal and policy aspects of, which I appreciate because that's not the pathway I wear very often. And if history has taught us anything, it's taught us that what is legal is not always what's right. And so what I'm curious around is how we change kind of like the value-based approach in the way that we, like, if what is legal is the standard, girls of color are still in the center. So how do we not only change what is the legal standard, but how do we also shift the conversation around what is right, as opposed to like, I don't want Waterbury just to do what they're legally required to do. I need them to do more than that. And the same is true with Hartford, and the same is true with every school district. And also, like you use the statement of similarly situated.
Yes.
And I'm like, if you are the only girl of color in that classroom, you're not similarly situated to anybody else. Like,
You
the
are,
kind of
though.
racial stress that you expect. Like, I don't know how do you, what's the legal definition there of, like, the kind of
A
isolation
student,
and racial
just-
stress that you experience? Like, you don't have peers there.
You do.
Yeah.
So the way the law works is similarly situated is not because you're the same color, it's because you're a student in the school. So every student is similarly situated to one another because you're in the school. So if you're one and you're feeling isolated, you're still similarly situated to all your classmates, you're just not being treated fairly. So if the legal standard were actually being applied, then we wouldn't have these issues. But the problem is that the law is not being followed. Let's look at, in terms of the disproportionality we've been talking about, the disparate treatment, a lot of students who have disabilities are targeted, and they're sent right into the pipeline. Well, a school has a duty to engage in what's called the interactive process with that kid's parents. How can we accommodate your child's learning style? What do they need? Their behavioral issues? A lot of that's not happening in schools. So, are we supposed to do, have a PPT and an IEP and all of that stuff? Yes. But in addition to that, the school, if you request an accommodation for your child, you have to accommodate that child. And the schools are missing the mark left and right. And I see it with the cases that are filed. So the legal standard is not being followed. If we get to following the legal standard, we'd be in a really good place.
You know how we do that? Funding. If we tie funding to disproportionate resources, to disproportionate contact, game changer, done, it's over.
On a moral and ethical level, it's how do you get people to look at a child and live worry about parent head on? What if that's your child? I mean, and I think what we see even within the legal framework of the system, I've been arguing, for example, that substance abuse is an addiction and should be treated as such for 17 years. It is fascinating that judges used to sneer and laugh at that when they were black and brown folks coming before courts are now suddenly very sympathetic that they look at someone who looks like them and it could be their child. And suddenly the entire, focus of it changes. And so I think really on a moral and ethical level, it's people are looking at children and they're not even identifying being in the same vein as theirs, and that's why we have this problem.
You want to take one more question?
Do I?
You're looking at the faces of this, so I don't want to get.
I'm following rules, okay?
That's the audience.
So,
Do we have more questions? Yes, I want to make sure we get all questions and issues or concerns on this.
I heard dozens just now. So do you have questions?
Wow, we're gonna
We're gonna go into think tanks.
Yes.
So